And welcome to Bookmark.
Thank you so much.
Marja Henderson, the book Long Shall You Live. This is your first work then?
This is,
and
yes.
what brought this out in you deciding to become an author?
Well, I didn't decide to be an author. The Holy Spirit moved me in a very special way several years ago when I was in a health crisis. And through my prayer on a Good Friday, the Holy Spirit moved me and showed me a path to a new patron saint.
Right.
The patron saint happened to be St. Francis de Sales. I looked him up, and he's the patron saint of writers. So I had to chuckle a little bit because I thought, Lord, you send me to a patron saint of writers, you know. So I got another confirmation shortly thereafter. And so I said, well, what am I supposed to write? And the only message I kept getting over and over again is just write what you know.
Right.
Well, what I know after decades of talking with my mother and father was this beautiful story about them and what they lived through during the Nazi occupation of Holland during World War II. And I was blessed with parents who were willing to talk about this horrible time, whereas many people didn't know the deep nature of the sorrow and the tragedy.
Right. In fact, it
time.
took over many years, really, in small bites, right, to get this information.
And the older I got, the more he would fill in some of the blanks. When you're
He was
young,
in Buchenwald, right?
He was in Buchenwald. He helped start the Dutch resistance in Holland in May 1941. No, 1940. He was one of the very first ones, and he was doing espionage and sabotage for the Dutch government who had fled into England, so
Right.
also the information was valuable to the British as well. And so he did that for a while and was finally caught about seven months after he began this, with dynamite getting ready to blow up some of the shipyards in Rotterdam where he worked. He was a very stubborn Dutchman, as they say, that he was not going to allow the Germans to use their country for a war machine. Well, he was captured. There was a breach in the underground, and that meant someone was captured.
Which was not totally unusual.
No, but they did try many special ways to prevent this scenario playing out. But, you know, they were young men. My dad was only 19 when he joined.
He wasn't married to your mother at the time.
He was not. They knew each other as children and kind of grew up together. Dad always kind of had a soft spot for her, and Mom was very, very religious. You know, she was maybe thinking of a different vocation. I'm not sure, but
really?
Wouldn't have surprised me either. So Dad got involved with the resistance, was captured, was a witness to one of the first mass executions of 18 people of the resistance, and he was forced to witness it and then take care of the aftermath. Very traumatic, and he talked quite a bit about that.
And how long was he actually, once he was captured, and was he sent directly to Buchenwald?
No, he spent 2 years in a prison in Holland, and then he thought he was just going to stay in that prison throughout the war, but that changed in April of 41. He was taken, like so many of the other people, to this time to Buchenwald concentration camp. He was there in 41, and
that was like a labor camp, basically?
That was a labor camp. He helped to build the camp and the factory, and then worked in it. And he did that. He was of some value to the SS because he was a machinist.
Right.
And they were pulling young men from all over the place in different camps in order to get this factory in Buchenwald built so that they can continue the war. So Dad was there.
What did his faith have to do with his ability to survive something like this? First, I'm assuming his faith had something to do with why he decided to stand up, let alone how he survived, right?
It was his patriotism, his faith. His faith was a huge part. It was for my mother to survive the atrocities that she had to live through in occupied Holland as well. They were both very devout Catholic, born and raised generation after generation. Holland was a very Catholic country in many ways.
Well, it's kind of sad
Protestant-
if we look back today.
Yes,
but,
it is, but that's a whole other book probably.
Right.
Maybe I won't be writing it though. But in any event, he got involved, and
also, I think in reading the book, the idea that when he would come, he was kind of like one of the leaders
He
there,
was.
and one of the people would help them adapt to there. And I always think of the
Correct.
Viktor Frankl thing, where people of faith who held on, and other people who just gave up.
they did. I'm glad you brought that up, because the reason he survived, and I asked him several times, was, Dad, how did you survive this? He said, well, I was young. I was single. I was healthy at the time. I had a trade. I was too stubborn. He just thought it was too soon for him in his life. But the biggest thing that got him through was his faith in God. And he survived so long in Buchenwald that those that were coming in over time, even near the end of the war, but nobody knew when the end of the war was going to be.
Right.
They would say, no, you need to go, you go see Minas in this barrack.
Right.
He's been here, he knows how to survive
your
this.
dad's name.
And that's my dad.
Now that was Patton who actually freed?
General Patton came, and my dad, it's a beautiful ending to his time in Buchenwald as a prisoner, because he was within hours, maybe a day, of dying. He was like 95 pounds. They hadn't eaten in 4 days, and there was a very poignant part that he told me about was he saw the SS distributing dynamite all over the camp, outside the camp, within the camp, and he took one of his best friends, who was also in the resistance, also from Holland, and he said, you know, come here, come sit with me. And he said, you know, there's a good chance we're going to die today, even throughout this whole thing. The SS had already left, and left just a few people left to do the last job they had to do, and that was to destroy everything.
Right.
So he said, come sit with me. So they sat down together, and he says, you know, I think we might die today, but by golly, we're not going to die on an empty stomach. He had saved a piece of bread, one of the last ones that he had, and broke it and gave the other gentleman half of it, and within a few hours,
Wow.
the Sherman tanks came.
Very
That's just
Eucharistic
one.
in nature there.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness, yes.
And there's much more, because
Oh,
then
there's
they
so
get
much.
back together and then come over to the States, and you're here.
Yeah.
And the book is Long Shall You
Long
Live.
Shall You Live.
And thank you so much, Marja Henderson.